Hello there, incredible people. Let's move on to chapter 16. Move. Where is that? This is a really good one as well. Well, let me get into this one here. One day, Chris was praying again. She was feeling that God was asking us to move. Now, she felt it was just another part of town, not really too far from where we lived. We actually lived in a brand new mobile home, which is another God story, which was really cool. And this gated community is really a nice place. We enjoyed that. Payments were low, quiet. Anyway, she felt that, and she got some confirmation. She kept asking me to pray. I said, okay, if God tells us to move, I'll certainly do that. In the natural, it really made no sense. We really liked what we had. But if God had his plan, if it was to move a few miles away for whatever his reason, then that's what we would do. So anyway, I prayed. Every day I asked about it, never heard anything for quite a long time. I'm talking a few months. And then, in different miraculous ways, God sent me to India with my pastor, Joe, who's awesome. Anyway, on the way back, on a 35-hour plane ride, that'll wear you out. And I was praying, asked God for moving, and all I got was yes. And so when I got home, I told Chris, and we prayed again. And the next morning, I had gotten up early for prayer, about 5 in the morning, and walked into my office. And as soon as I stepped in my office, as if I heard the Spirit of God say, "You are on holy ground." I know that sounds strange, but that's what I heard. And instantly, I knew where the scripture and verse was, and I wrote it down. I really did not know where that was other than in Genesis. I can't tell you where it is right now. But I wrote it down going, wow. And I just knew it was. It's one of those things, if you've experienced it, you know what I mean. You just knew what you heard was the truth. And so I had talked to a gentleman just a few days earlier that I had taken to the airport, and he told me whenever you're in the presence of God, ask him questions. Don't just sit there. He will talk back. So that came to my mind. And I started asking questions. I would ask a question, I'd pray and ask, God, what kind of house? And different things. And I got all these different details. The kind of house it was, that we'd have a ton of fun, Chris and I, looking for this house. We would know exactly the one it was when we saw it. It would be more than I would ever expect, and there would be nothing to do to it at all when we moved in. It would be move-in ready. And the last thing he said is, it's not around here. And again, I instantly knew that was out of state. Now, I'd never been out of state in my entire life. I moved into California, Southern California, when I was age 4. And have never moved very far at all. So when I heard that, I sat there for a really minute or two thinking about it, then finally said, okay, God, wherever you want me to go. Now that morning we had an appointment to get financing for this other home. But she also knew we had to pray and get confirmation from God to see what he was doing. We've learned that sometimes he moves you in one direction to get you to another. We understand that now. It's only from experience. Anyway, we went to this particular meeting about the mortgage and get a loan, that kind of thing. It ended up being the only way you could get it was everything against what I would believe in, which is a first and a second, a balloon payment, everything. It was just nothing I would want to do. But I listened because I already knew God had spoke, so I listened to it. And so right after the mortgage meeting, we pulled over, myself, Chris, and AJ. It was just a little 3-year-old. And when he said it's not around here, and I knew it was out of state, she instantly said, okay, let's go home and start looking. So that's how easy she is. I mean, when it's God, she's just ready to roll. If it's not, she'll ask you about 200 questions because she wants to know what's going on. And that's good. Good to have her around with me. I'll tell you, I'm too easy going with things at times. So we got home, and just Chris and I only knew about this, and we started looking at the internet, and we just said, let's go online at Realtor.com. And we started looking at the nearby states, Oregon, different states. So where would we like to move? And I said, well, I'd like to be in the mountains, but whatever God says we'll do. So we really did have fun looking. We really weren't aware that things were so much cheaper in other states compared to California. And we were just having a blast and enjoying it, and just her and I, and talking it over. So from there we went to different places, just kept following it, and finally said, okay, we need to pray and hear God. And later on that night we had a prayer meeting in our church, our overnight prayer meeting. Around midnight I was actually just laying on the floor praying, and I asked God, where do you want us to move? And he said, Tennessee. Now go home, wake up Chris, and look. And so I did. Went home, woke her up. She said, okay. We looked, and through a variety of different circumstances, we got to East Tennessee. And a home popped up that sounded good. Wasn't the one we said, wow, that's it, but it sounded really great. Let's, email that realtor and find out. We got a different realtor sent back the information. Realtor named Sandy. So we worked with her. That home wasn't available. It was sold. And we continued from there. Later on in the day, we came back, and Chris and I looked some more, again, just by ourselves. And when we saw this one particular house on the screen, the Spirit of God said that was it. All we could see was the front of it. It was brick. Could not see the sides or back. There weren't any other pictures. So we emailed the realtor. We had talked to Sandy, and she said she would go to the home, get pictures, and email it by the next morning. The next morning was going to be church. So we went to church, Chris and I and the family. AJ, being as young as she is, when Chris went to pick her up, there was another young gentleman in there, a different gentleman teaching that day, and he was trying to tell the kids about hearing God, which they had never done in that younger children's class before, not that I was aware of. And he just happened to say that AJ saw a picture, and Chris said, "Really?" And AJ said, "Yes, it's a house, and it was yellow." And so that excited Chris, saying, "Wow, She said, "Okay." So we went home. The pictures were there, and guess what color the house was? Because she took pictures of all sides. The house was yellow. She said it was move-in ready, and there was nothing to do to this home at all. Nothing was needed. Everything was painted. There wasn't even a nail hole in the wall. But it was really big, and I said, "Wow, that's a big house. The price is so low compared to California," but it was still big. Didn't understand why. Definitely more than we ever needed or expected. And so that day I said, okay, I need to first tell Mikey and Lacey. We were really close to them, and they were just barely a year married. And then we need to tell my friend Daryl and my pastor. And we were going to have lunch with my friend Daryl and his wife later that day. But we brought Lacey and Mikey over and started to tell them everything and what happened and where we were moving. And they just looked at each other and smiled and said that God spoke to them that they were to move to East Tennessee about a week ago, a week prior to us. So that was awesome. They all moved with us. It was so great. I was so concerned about leaving them. And then we went to eat out with Daryl and Gladys. And if you know my buddy Daryl, biggest teddy bear, awesome guy, we sat there, and before I even said anything, he started watering up with his eyes and getting tears in his eyes, said, God told me you were going to move. And so we told them the story, and they were excited for us and wanted to fly back with us to see it. And then I called my pastor, Joe. Now, no one had ever known anything. We didn't say anything. Actually, I had left a message with him on his door that I want to speak to him later. When I called him up, he answered and said, God told me, Mike, you're moving. And if it's God, I'm all for it. And so that's kind of how not only the things that happened, but it was such confirmation. And then on top of that, Chris and I that night were just so blown away by how good God is and how He's so clear. But we prayed, God, we see we're supposed to move. We just want to make sure exactly, we you would think we'd get it, that's it. But we said, God, we really want to know with such sincere prayers. We wanted to hear that was the right exact place. Because that's a huge thing. I said to her, gosh, if we move, we're going to affect lives. And where we go are going to affect our lives as well as our children. Well, that night I had one of those dreams. It wasn't that I was there, but He knew it was God. He woke up with details. I woke up, it was in the morning, and I just thank God for it. It was very quick. We were in a car, Chris and I. We were driving. Next to us was a car, and it had two ladies in it. One lady was our pastor's wife, Sandy, from our first church, and the other lady in the car was this new Sandy, the realtor. We pulled over, showed them land, property, and they said it was fantastic, wonderful. This is it. And I woke up. It was that short and that quick. And I thanked God and asked God, what was that? And He said, what are the ladies' names? I said, Sandy. And what it was, one represented, the spiritual side and ministry of Sandy, the pastor's wife. The other one, the second Sandy, represented business. And I said, okay. Not clear what that meant, but business and spiritual, I'm all for it, whatever God has to do. And right after that, about an hour later, I received a phone call from a manager with EcoQuest. He always called about once a month, see how things were going business-wise. Never asked things personal, though. And this time Scott did. He said, Mike, what's new? Something else up? And I explained to him I thought we were supposed to move. And we were just hearing from God on it. And before I said any more, he said, well, I've been all over this country, and the only place I would move is East Tennessee. I was pretty amazed again. I said, okay, thanks. That's where we think we're going. Well, we know we're going now. And we talked a bit and stuff. And then right after that, I called to speak with a realtor, Sandy, in Tennessee. She wasn't there, but another gentleman picked up the phone. I was just talking to him, saying hi, and asked how it was around there. And he said the same words. He said, hey, I've been all over this country, wonderful places, but I live here now, and this is the only place I would move, is East Tennessee. So we were pretty much done. It was ready to go. I want to tell you, from that day, 30 days later, within that time frame, I flew here, looked at the house personally with my daughter, Misty, knew that was the place, made the deal, and again, 30 days from that date, or what I just told you about, hearing it and telling people and getting phone calls and confirmation, 30 days later, we're in East Tennessee. And between that was when AJ was adopted by the judge, and awesome, wonderful things if you just heard chapter 14. So that's the story of Move, Where Is That? That's right, when I did hear that, Tennessee, immediately in my mind, my non-geographical mind said, where is that? I didn't even know where Tennessee was as far as geographically. I always just thought it was in the south. I didn't really know. I pictured dirt roads and hollows and all kinds of things that are you get these pictures of that aren't true. It's a wonderful place to live. Incredible people. I love California and Tennessee. That's it. Thanks so much. Have a tremendously blessed day.